Greetings, friends and Firebirds fans, and welcome to the Fire and Ice podcast presented by Desert Willow Golf Resort. Fire and Ice, the official podcast of your Coachella Valley Firebirds of the American Hockey League. Coming to you from Palm Desert, California, a mere Jessica Campbell sketched power play away from the Birds' home ice of Acrisure Arena. I'm your host, Judd Spicer. Along with this bi-monthly endeavor, also have privilege and the pleasure of again serving as your Firebirds insider for this sophomore season. An article a month, you can find that and those online at cvfirebirds.com. That, of course, is your home for all things Coachella Valley Firebirds, including, but certainly not limited to, team, roster, schedule, merchandise information. I'm also going to suggest that you download the CV Firebirds application. Great way to get tickets for your Firebirds games and everything happening yonder way in Palm Desert at Acrisure Arena. Per the presenting sponsor of this program, the aforementioned Desert Willow Golf Resort, right here in sunny Palm Desert, California, home to 36 holes, the Mountain View and Fire Cliff courses, respectively. Also, the excellent and on-site Palm Desert Golf Academy can make it a phenomenal putt-to-puck day. Just 3 miles separated from Acrisure Arena is Desert Willow Golf Resort, and they have recently, I should add, added to their mantle many accolades and awards over the years. In recent days, acknowledged by the California Golf Course Owners Association as the 2023 Course of the Year. Big backslaps to Desert Willow Golf Resort. You can get your tee times online at desertwillow.com. All right, friends, joining me in this December 7, 2023 episode of Fire and Ice, we got a great one for you. Firebirds defenseman Connor Carrick. And I got to give assist to my pal and colleague Shad Powers of the Desert Sun for this one, as I trust several, if not most of you, may have read in recent weeks Shad's excellent article on Connor in the Desert Sun, where he discussed not merely Connor's 11-year pro hockey career, but also his dual life, his other endeavor as host of the Curious Competitor with Connor Carrick. It's a podcast that he has hosted for the last 3 years, and a lot of fascinating subject matter, much of it taking place off the ice. Truly a lot of fascinating stuff and subject matters that Connor has delved into to date on his program, including conversations with former teammates, delving into performance, mental health, wellness, mind and body, nutrition, talking a lot about the brain. Really interested to have this visit with Connor on this episode. We'll also, of course, talk about his debut season with the Firebirds. Before we get to that conversation, let's take a moment here to delve into the Firebirds freeze frame segment of this program. And let's start with this, the interesting, if not curious, to borrow from Connor Carrick's title of his program, the season itself is also curious. The metric continues, friends. Firebirds overall 10-7-1 on the season. That places them 6th in the Pacific Division. The aforementioned curiosity comes from this number. This is the headline. 8-1 away from Acrisure Arena, which is the top winning percentage in the American Hockey League. However, at home, Birds are just 2-6-1, and that places them 31st out of the AHL's 32 teams per home winning percentage. As far as the schedule, no great segue from that, although that's certainly something else we'll touch upon with this episode's guest, Connor Carrick. Let's take a brief look at the schedule ahead as we delve further into the month of December, tick-tock to the end of 2023. Firebirds soon to hit the road yonder Abbotsford, where they have back-to-back on Friday the 8th and Saturday, December 9th, 2 games against Abbotsford. Then get a couple days off as they return here to the desert proper, where again, the Birds will face Abbotsford. That takes place at home That's the next home game, Wednesday, December 13th. Abbotsford, by the way, they're tough. They're good. 13-5-1 on the season to date. So those games, while we're still early-ish in the season, I mean, we've now reached the quarter pole of this second year of Firebirds hockey. These 3 games may mean something down the line come April in the Firebirds season. We've got 3 straight games again against Abbotsford, a couple days off, and then another back-to-back, both of these games taking place at home at Acrisure Arena. That's Saturday, December 16th. That's a 6 p.m. puck drop versus Bakerfield. Follow that up directly on Sunday, the 17th, with a 5 p.m. home game versus Colorado. Another big facet and feature of this Firebirds season thus far, talked about this in the most recent episode with the Firebirds play-by-play voice, Evan Pivnik, is the transactions. And they continue, friends, by my count, by my Minnesota math. It's 8. 8 to date. Now, while 5 of these gentlemen are now back with the Firebirds, we had more guys called up. That includes our captain. Can I still say our captain? He's now with Seattle. But traditionally, our captain and our leading scorer, Max McCormick, good for Max, got called up to the Kraken in recent days, as did defenseman Riker Evans. That seemed an inevitability, but kudos to young Riker on getting called up to the National Hockey League. One other transaction worthy of note, this comes by way of the ECHL up to the Firebirds. Goalie Jack LaFontaine, he's kind of had his own chutes and ladders this season, going up and down between the two teams. But with a recent injury, this is freaky. This is scary. This took place on Saturday, December 2nd, in the overtime loss to Ontario, where goalie Alastejka, hope I pronounced that name right, know that I butchered it before. Not a laughing matter, certainly, as a freaky injury had to be helped off the ice. Chris Drieger ultimately finished that game, but I suspect this is why we've again seen goalie Jack LaFontaine called back up to the Birds. That just happened yesterday, the day before this program is being recorded. A lot of transactions, a lot of up and down. Didn't see much of that last year. We're amply seeing it this year, something to keep track of as we continually assess the roster, assess the lines, and assess the Firebirds' concurrent lineups. As far as the leading scorers on your Firebirds to date, nobody in the American Hockey League in the top 20. The aforementioned Max McCormick, again now up with Seattle, leading scorer thus far into the year for the Birds, 17 total points. That includes a team high, tied 8 goals, a couple of 9 assists. Cole Lind right there with 16 total points. Cameron Hughes, 15 points on the year. He has 3 goals, matched with a team best 12 assists. Shane Wright, 14 total points, tied with McCormick for the Birds' lead with 8 goals. He's got 6 assists. And young Logan Morrison, having a great rookie season in the AHL, 13 total points. He's matching 5 goals with 8 assists. In the net, Chris Drieger has had a really, really strong season for the Birds. He was one of those call-ups, by the way. Now, of course, back with CV. 7-5-1 mark on the season. His 2.24 goals against tracks third in the American Hockey League for netminders with double-digit starts. His save percentage of .916 ranks 9th in the AHL, again, for netminders with double-digit starts thus far into the season. All right, friends. All that offered, all that prefaced, let's get to this episode's visit with Firebirds defenseman Connor Carrick. All right, friends. As prefaced on this episode of the Fire and Ice podcast, my guest hails from Orland Park, Illinois. I should say all that Chicago man. Now in his 11th year of professional hockey, that resume reads over 240, I believe 248 specifically, NHL games, that includes regular season, and playoffs. That CV is coupled with 332 games in the American Hockey League, the last 16 of which have been this year, debuting for the Coachella Valley Firebirds on the blue line. Along with his hockey career, also the host of the very informative and very alliterative Curious Competitor with Connor Carrick. That preface offered, I think you can probably guess, friends, that my guest is Connor Carrick, defenseman for the Firebirds. Connor, appreciate your time, man.
John, absolutely. Anytime.
Let's start with this. Just a couple softballs and a couple of quick hitters. We got about, I think, 5 off days in a row for the Firebirds this week before the travel to yonder Abbotsford. Let's go chronologically, if we will. Monday was the Firebirds Invitational Golf Tournament. I trust you played.
I did. I did play.
And how'd you play?
I was pretty happy. It's a scramble, so the pressure's always off until it isn't. Until the three guys ahead of you, don't hit a good shot, and then you really got to come through. But I was happy, and then on the longest drive, I was pretty jacked. I might be looking at one of those long drive like monitor things.
Okay.
My friend there had me at, I think it was 124 swing speed, and I was able to cook it like 330 yards. So
Wow.
the driver's kind of the hit or miss on how my round goes, and I was able to keep between the lines most holes. So I was happy with that.
And how'd your team finish?
I think we finished 9 under. I forget where that put us. As soon as I realized we were not going to win, I stopped checking on the tally and was just getting ready to get out of there and get ready for the practice day. That was the next day.
Going again in linear fashion. I think a Firebirds fan, may have posted this yesterday. So let's see. The tournament was on Monday. Yesterday at Acrisure Arena, Stevie Nicks showed a picture of you with some fan there. Accurate?
Yeah, that was cool. I'm a pretty big Stevie Nicks fan. Landslide was my mom and I danced to that at my wedding. So that song kind of gets me in the tears most times. And last night was no different. And it was cool. It was cool to have a pocket. My wife's a big fan too. So we had John Hayden came over and watched my son, my almost 3-year-old, and did bedtime with him. And we were able to go to the concert, which was cool, and get to practice today.
John Hayden babysat your kid.
Yeah, him and his fiance Lauren were able to. They babysit. They basically play shinny for 3 hours with my son, with a couple hockey games in the background, and then did bedtime. And Charlie was pretty excited. He had a new Christmas book, so John had the luxury of breaking that in for him.
Always good to have a Yaley, a guy that went to Yale, who also really knows how to fight, babysitting your kid.
Yeah, that's a whole nother beast. Charlie has a pretty strong propensity for physicality, and John I think encourages that. They bring out the best in each other that way.
All right, Connor, let's take it on the ice. We are now quarter pole. We're quarter way through. Surprisingly, it feels like kind of a blur, but yeah, we've played 18 games of the Firebirds' second season. How would you assess? It's a big, broad question, but how would you assess the Firebirds at 10-7-1? How would you assess the club to date?
I mean, you always want to have a club strong enough to outplay teams, and I think we've been able to establish that a lot of nights. The art of winning and making sure that get the full 60-minute effort and execute that is something we've talked about, and it's something you build towards. There's a lot of turnover at this level, which every team goes through. So there's no excuse, but I think it's continue to reinforce the identity of what's expected at each position all throughout our lineup for the entirety of the game, and then dragging. When you've got your B game, let's say, let the guys that have the A game kind of drag you into it instead of the other way around, where you bring the club down with a few decisions that make the game just more difficult for the next guy. And so that's our conversation. And I've seen it both ways. I've seen teams get off to really hot starts. It's a dangerous thing to all of a sudden think you're entitled to have a good year. And then at the quarter, I'd say we're in a good spot launching wise. I think we've wrapped our head around what will bring us success night in, night out. Now it's just about doing it.
After the 4-3 overtime loss to Ontario on December the 2nd, this Saturday past, one of the folks in the post-game presser, your teammate Cole Lind, and I asked Cole, I said, you had a great game, man. Unfortunate loss in overtime, scary injury, also should be noted. But I said, after your 2 goals, a very emphatic response each time. Not the kind of response you might expect in the 18th game of the season, but like playoff type responses. And he said, "Yeah, there's a little extra fire. There was a little extra wick that was lit." And he said that was kind of preceded by the fact that you guys had a team meeting which ultimately involved kicking out the coaches. Those are, I think, his words, not mine. Can you take us in? Can you pull back the curtain just a little bit, Connor, on that team meeting and what the Firebirds discussed?
Well, you want the good in your game to crowd out the bad. So you, it's hockey's not a game where you necessarily just stop doing bad things and stop making mistakes entirely. You just want to increase the clip of good decisions and what it is exactly you bring. So we just had a conversation, with each guy, like, hey man, what do you do here? There's a lot of guys in pro hockey. Why were you selected? What can this group, expect from you? And a reminder that we see in practice a lot of times, like we have a competitive group, like we know what we can do. And so we just kind of solidified that and try to refocus for the weekend.
Do you feel like whether this meeting, let me ask this a different way. You're a hockey veteran. You've done it 11 years. In your experience, are meetings like this where you might need a little kick in the tush? Are they genuinely or generally productive? They result in good things when you have players meetings like this?
Yeah, I think it's easy when things kind of are going awry to start focusing on like where the holes in your boat are instead of focusing the conversation on where you want to go directionally. And the goal is to like clarify and simplify. This is what each individual does within the goal of how our team plays. And when you're able to kind of create that clarity, that's really to get confidence coming to the rink before you even take warm up. You become a lot clearer on like, okay, these are the few plays that kind of get me into the flow of the game. These are the plays that kind of maintain the flow of the game, and what might be the kryptonite that the other club really feeds off of. And then all of a sudden, your strengths as a player start to roll, through all five guys on the ice, all four lines, and that's where a club starts to look like a machine. And, a lot of, I'm sure, what the club saw last year. I was with the Providence Bruins. It was the same thing. Like we didn't have a great start, and we had to have a conversation around what each guy did within our team structure, and it just creates that simplicity. That's what a win does. That's when you're on a roll. You're like, you just can't even fathom losing. There's it's just not going to happen. Versus on the other side of the coin, when you lose a few games, you kind of get into a rut. And it happens in different areas of your game. Like we talked about the home record, power plays go through it, penalty kills go through it over the course of a season. And you're in much better shape when you kind of able to highlight the conversation and show video of like, hey guys, reminder, this is what it looks like going well.
Right.
And this is you doing it. This is not we're not asking you for anything you're not capable of. And just the timing of it. We got to make sure it happens. So I agree with Lindy in a lot of ways that the sentiment and the intensity he was getting at.
I think, and this is perhaps just a guess, but I hope an educated one, that part of the impetus for having such a meeting like that was certainly not based on the Firebirds' away record, which is an AHL best 8-1. Inversely, and quite curiously, Connor, the home record after Saturday's overtime loss, even though you got a point for it, I think we can still say it fell to 2-6-1, which is second to last in the American Hockey League. You were not here last year, but I gather you're well informed. You know of all the success, and you may well know that during the regular season, there were 7 losses in regulation all of last year. We are already up to 6, and now we have the overtime loss. How do you explain that, man?
I mean, you really can't. I think the coaching staff would even, we have a lot of experience in our coaching staff. I'm genuinely curious. We've talked about it, but you don't want to create this, pressing sensation where you're hyper focusing on it. It's like, all right, fine, we can have the conversations we had at home versus away, but what literally are the plays going on that we're not making. And I think a little bit of what it is just the poise, particularly at home, that builds your game. Like, you don't have to hit a home run every shift. And you've got to avoid certain mistakes where you just can't make the game easy for the other team, where you're playing from behind. And I think that's been a big part of it is on the road. We've been a little bit more patient building our game. Like, we're going to get into the game. We're going to execute some of our systems. And we're not going to get bored with kind of just doing it, making the next right play, if that makes sense.
It does. And, you referenced the coaching staff. I want to go back to that players meeting that seemingly started with the coaches and ended without the coaches. Why is it meaningful? Why is it impactful to have the coaches leave the room at a time like that?
Well, I think it's prompted, and it was kind of prompted by the coaches. It wasn't like we said, get out of here.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, we are the players on the ice. The puck is on our stick. Whether we want the puck to hit us on a block shot and the game's on the line, or it's really is up to us. They can apply whatever pressure they can. They can use rewards with ice time. They can threaten guys. Like, everyone's played for a different array of coaches. I think our staff recognizes the best clubs. You want to empower your players. You want leaders on the ice that all throughout your lineup feel confident, feel like their ice time and their play matters. And I'd say that's a huge strength of our coaching staff. They don't really overlook any one player, they don't make anyone feel like a secondary or second-rate sort of player. And that's always been my belief, and what I witnessed in the really high-end teams is there is a resiliency that emerges when the players are a part of the conversation of what's expected. It's player on player looking at each other. It can be harp. It can be, warm support. Like, it takes different shapes for different players at different times. And that's what you hopefully find out through the course of the regular season. And you build. I would say there's a saying for hockey, like every 10 games, the league's entirely different. Through the 10-game mark, teams are at a certain clip. 10 games later, there are plays being made and rhythms that are found that you didn't see once in those first 10 games.
Yeah.
And that exists all the way through the playoffs where, man, when the playoffs roll around, the teams that are humming best, it is incredible the way that they play hockey. The breakout, they're so consistent. And then the one time they need to make a differently routed play, they execute that. The power plays, I'll give you, I think our power plays kind of managed earlier in the season where we've had some hot stretches. We've had some stretches where, like, man, the puck's not going in. Maybe we got to score off the breakout. Like
Right.
You've got to manufacture a way to feel good. It's not the, set up the perfect one-timer, bang it in the open net. And so your team needs to be athletic and resilient that way. And when your players are a part of the conversation, it's not just a one-way conversation of the coach saying, this is what I expect, you better do this or else. I think it just kind of undermines players' ability to, really take ownership of what they want to be.
As far as those coach player rapport for you specifically, I'll ask you this lastly for the on the ice conversation, Connor. Not your first rodeo with Dan Bilesma in 2021, correct? You were a member of
Correct.
Charlotte Checkers when he was assistant
Yep.
coach there before being named the head coach. I trust that for you to play for him there and now play for him here. You two, as a couple of veterans, must have a nice rapport.
I mean, he was a big part of the reason I wanted to sign here. I really appreciate his hockey mind. I think he's an absolute gift to this level. I mean, he's clearly proven he can coach, as high a level as this game can offer, and with all his success in the National Hockey League and in Charlotte, I think it was mutual. There was, I was in the NHL previously, he was in the NHL previously, and you can mope. You can be upset about your current situation, or you can play the ball as it lies and, like, hey man, we're still playing a fun game. And his energy was very infectious in me at that time, and I hope my energy was infectious on him. And these conversations were had in Charlotte. It's been a bit of a joke actually in Coachella Valley about the good old days in Charlotte. But it was a unique group where there was a blend of you had Florida involved, you had Seattle didn't have a lot of prospects. It was kind of a vagabond group. And that can really go awry, with the different power struggles of NHL teams. We're kind of left alone. Like, it was pretty good meritocracy. Like, the best players, sort of played. Uh, Dan had his element. Jordy Kinnear did a great job. He was another strong head coach who I learned a lot from. And I was extremely confident, really when I saw the roster and I knew who the staff was even last year. I was like, that team's going to be the real deal, which happened. I may have been unofficially kind of a part of the Coachella Valley Firebirds fan club after we were knocked out. Max McCormick's a best friend. John Hayden's a best friend. A lot of guys, I played with Matt Tennyson for a while. Joey DeCord, Alex True, a lot of these guys. Like, I loved playing with these guys, and I was rooting them for them to have success, and they had that. And then the roll around to this year, like I wanted to be on that train.
Friends, you're tuning in to the Fire and Ice podcast presented by Desert Willow Golf Resort. My guest is Firebirds defenseman Connor Carrick. When he's not on the ice, I sense and know that Connor has many other endeavors that don't involve skating at all. Among them, serving as host of the Curious Competitor podcast with Connor Carrick. Connor, this is an endeavor you started approximately 3 years ago, 74 episodes in the can. Take us back to the impetus for starting this endeavor 3 years back.
I was trying to improve my reading habit. I wanted to read more. My wife was like, I think you'd really be into these podcasts. It seems like a form you drive a lot, train and things like that. And I was hooked immediately. And I just couldn't believe the availability of expert out there, whether they were funny hockey stories or neuroscience conversations, peak performance sort of conversations in the business world and elsewhere. And I realized just the access that I might have as an athlete, and I want to tap into some of these and meet some of these people and be able to ask questions that I might particularly have. And it's been fun. It's been a labor of love, over the last few years. I enjoy doing it. It's, as you know, it's sometimes difficult to maintain a schedule with pro hockey, and that's definitely been my experience. So we'll see where I want to go with it here in the next little while.
And assist again, as I mentioned at the outset of this program, Shad Powers, the Desert Sun, did a great article a couple of weeks back on Connor. Talked a lot about his podcast, The Curious Competitor, with Connor Carrick. In that Desert Sun article, I'm going to take a step back on this a little bit, man. I mean, to hear you talk now and to listen to your shows, listen to about 8 or 10 of them in the last few days before this conversation. I'm not telling folks out there, hey, you got to go to college, because you didn't go to college, but and listen to these shows, man. Your vocabulary, your intellect, your style of communication, it's all very, very sharp, man. Have you always been this smart?
That's that's I don't know. I've always identified as a good student. I would consider there's a bit of a chip on my shoulder in terms of not going to college. I always had an ambition to be very well educated, and I think if anything, it's sharpened that goal. Not having sort of a solid degree to prove it. It was education just always come naturally. Like, I have a hunger for it. And I think we live in a golden age of information. There isn't the gatekeeping of information that may have existed, I don't know, in high level business and all sorts of different realms, hockey. And I think about that earlier in my career, like to have access to the top coaches. Like, it was a pretty demanding thing to go sort out who these people are. Now with social media or different podcasts, like you can have a pretty good network or sort of family tree of who's who in a very short amount of time. And I've always found that very appealing. And I guess I don't know, in terms of the information exchange side, I've always considered what I do to be extremely physical. And you're in the world of marginal gains. Can I make just 1% more plays? Can I just be 1% faster? Versus the ideation world, like, just a little bit more creative. It's a little bit more exponential. You don't exactly always know what's going to emerge. And specifically talk about the podcast. Like, there's a lot of days I sit down, I'm like, oh man, I'm tired after practice, whatever. I think a nap would be nice. And then I have a really, page turning, like interesting conversation that invigorates me that day. They're not all like that, but I appreciate you listening 8 to 10. I know how much time research takes up my day for the podcast, and that's a hefty number.
It comes through quite quickly and quite clearly that you personally have a thirst and a quest for knowledge by listening to your program. And this goes deep. Some of this gets very technical, very scientific subject matters, including, but certainly not limited to self-betterment, spirituality, nutrition, neurosciences, AI. You delved into that a little bit, mindfulness. Is this for you? Is the podcast endeavors, is it a way for you to more so educate yourself on a path toward self-betterment, or is it a way to educate, entertain the listeners?
I'd say both, and there's a little bit of kind of a show and tell element. Like there's certain people and techniques that I found where, oh my god, I just can't believe this has been this effective for me, or I found this person or this modality to be really life changing. And a lot of the different phenomenon that we identify, particularly in high end sport, like the smartest practitioners in the world, whether they're hockey coaches or they're neuroscientists, like it's not some it factor, it's not some X factor. Like they know exactly what it is and can tell you how this is occurring. They can't always gift it to someone who just doesn't have it. There's a lot of this is innate. And I've given this example. Like I work out a lot of times in the summer for a while. I did this last summer with Ian Mack. He's got a pretty good name. Matthews was a client, Roman Yossi and Patrick Kane. And like Patrick Kane is known as this like extremely talented high-end puck player, right?
Right.
Well, when we train, we would do these like heart rate sort of tests or zones. And it was as if it never happened to him. Like there was no recovery needed. His heart was just able to clear the metabolites from exercise like so quickly that he came in like it was day one, day after day after day after day. And that allowed his talent to sort of shine through. Like there was no hangover from the day before. And so that's where it's like when you really peel back the onion, like players are excellent, not by accident. And I guess for myself, I've always been curious, like, what is beyond reach? Like, what is just innate to that player? And what can I steal, if anything, to make myself better? So
You referenced getting better, perhaps 1% better day by day. That would be related to the Japanese, I think you'd call it culture or practice or belief of Kaizen, something I've been
yes,
introduced to through my golf work and golf writing. That's something in which you're a true believer, right? You subscribe to the Kaizen.
I do. I think there's beauty in sort of the discipline of structuring your day, structuring your life to sort of achieve certain results, and then kind of piggyback off that. I think I've always had a natural relationship with Kaizen. I think it's like a very Western philosophy. Like you show up, you grind it out, you work, even when it's not working, you have faith that it will. Right? This is very like Tony Robbins-esque, right? We've all heard this rah intensity, and then it's like on the other end, it's like maybe you're sort of clearing space for the results to reveal themselves. And players go through ruts. It's like there's players that we can both think of in the NHL or in the AHL. Like they worked out this summer, they trained, they went to training camp, did their best to the process. On the other end, sometimes like better results just sort of reveal themselves. Exactly, point to any one exact reason. It's kind of that balance, control what you can and understand that there's an upper limit to that. Where
Yeah.
I don't know the way the world's going to go the way it wants to.
I also, and this may have been something that you mentioned in one of your episodes, or perhaps it's something I read about you. I can't recall. Meditation. You're a proponent of daily meditation. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
accurate?
Either that or breath work. I kind of alternate. I think they're two sides of the same coin. I think anytime it's the human mind's capable of tremendous distraction. Anytime you can take a break from that and just kind of recognize that some thoughts like well, why is this thought so prominent? Who put it there? When did I first start having that thought? What would it be like if I were to stop having that thought? How much more comfortable might my life be? And I also am a big believer in you just listen to some people that are like, if I identify, I think I'm a sharp guy, but like there's some really, really smart people out there. I was watching yesterday. It was like Ray Dalio, guys manage gazillions of dollars. And he's like, two most important things in my life was like I started to understand what my principles were. I wrote them down, and meditation. Like what would be Ray Dalio's consultation fee for an hour of his time? Probably be pretty high.
Yeah.
Or I could just take him at face value and believe him. He doesn't seem like he's hiding the answer. So there's been other influences, but meditation's been important for me. Yeah.
How long can you go for with the meditation on an individual sitting or session, if you want to call it that?
I'd say the longest I've probably done would be like a half hour, 45 minutes.
Pretty
I
good.
do a lot of times on the bus. Now, I'm not saying I'm not thinking that whole time. I mean, the goal is just to kind of begin again, right? Just that athleticism of I'm trying to notice what's going on. Oh, I got on the ride. I got on the roller coaster of thinking again. Jump off the ride again. Kind of see it for what it is, and it's a practice that's tremendously helped me sleep. It's helped me tremendously in my parenting, and my relationship. And these are all trying things. It sucks when you can't sleep. It's really difficult when your partner looks at you and goes, you've been a bear to be with, or and no parent wants to be short with their child, but when I tell Charlie, like, stop pulling my hair 10 times, and he does it the 11th, like, that's where the meditation comes in. You gotta reset.
You've been in pro hockey for a long time. I think I would say on my end, I've had the pleasure of interviewing probably thousands of athletes over the last near quarter century. I'll be honest, and this is a compliment. There's not a lot of guys I've come across, or women for that matter, who necessarily talk like you, who perhaps think like you, Connor, who express themselves in the way that you do, or who endeavor some of the same practices that we've just been talking about. Have you felt throughout your pro career that some of these things are in contrast to your teammates and what they believe and how they live their lives?
For sure. I mean, I don't use a fire hose, right? Like if they're curious and they want to talk about some things, like I'm here. I know that there were people that maybe suggested certain modalities to help me at younger times in my life, and it went way over my head. And there's a bit of that. But I also relate to them in more ways than not as well. Like our lifestyle is very similar. Our challenges of whatever it is, finding new homes, or maybe, I don't know, it could be any array of things. But I think I've always tried to sort of be there for my teammates, lead them if they want to be led, if they just want a friend, like I'll do that. And then on the other hand, like mindfulness is important, but like there's a physical mechanics component to the game. Like you still got to go out there and make plays. You still got to go out there and be in tremendous shape. There's no substitute for some of the physical work, and I take great pride in that side too. I would just guess I think I found a bit closer to the end of the road in that realm than most. I really went after it harder in my career and just realized like your nervous system needs a different stimulus here, and more squatting or more running or more skating is just not going to do it. You need to be a little bit more creative.
I'm trying to ask this next question in the nicest possible way. It's going to come across as a negative, but rest assured, it certainly isn't. Not everybody likes the smartest guy in the room.
I'm sorry, one more time, Jack.
I say not everybody always likes the smartest guy in the room. Has your
No, they
intellect
don't.
ever put you at odds with teammates?
Well, I mean, I've played with some other smart guys too. I mean, you don't want to be pompous, and you know, I've met arrogant people. I'm sure I've had displays of arrogance in my life. I'm not proud of them, and that's part of what you're trying to accomplish with the meditation. Like, was I a prick? Like, was I out of line with what I said? Was I why was I trying to protect myself in that moment? Whether it's a teammate chirping each other or you're talking about a concept, that kind of thing. Um, I don't know. I would say I'm happy to talk about these topics with people when asked. I would say we don't go into these waters most of the time in the locker room, and so maybe the contrast isn't there. I'm not. I don't know. I play with guys, for example, like tremendous hockey players. They go home and they play video games for 10 hours. I have no judgment on that. Like,
Yeah.
if that brings you great joy in your family structure, like everyone's cool with that agreement, like, hey man, all for it. Like, I think nothing. I don't think any less of you because you don't know who Alan Watts is or, you know, whoever else that you want to, talk about. But if you're like, if you want to come up to me and go, man, Connor, I just can't sleep at night. My mind's, racing. Like, what do you think we could? All right, man, I've been there. I've had all sorts of insomnia episodes. Like, let's chew on some techniques, man.
I think the favorite episode that I listened to, Connor, this was, I believe, from April of 22, a guy with a fascinating life story, a former teammate of yours and a former NHLer, Aaron Volpati. He's got an
Yeah,
incredible life story to tell. And what I enjoyed most about that, and I don't know if you know this or not, this is decidedly a compliment. You did a great job as an interviewer in that particular episode because you shut up.
yeah,
And sometimes, as an interviewer, and I hope that the listeners to this episode agree, sometimes the best thing to do is to just shut up and to let the guest or story subject tell their story. And you did that so wonderfully in that episode. He has an incredible life story to tell, and you really let him tell it. Are you conscious of being a podcast host like that, of being a good listener and letting the guests just simply tell their story without constantly interrupting?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, being the oldest of three, like I was always expected to be a leader. Decently extroverted. Like I enjoy talking. I enjoy expressing myself. I'm a pro athlete. Like I don't mind the limelight. It kind of comes with the job. So to play a support role and to bring the best out of people, like I've witnessed in other people. It's not something I, maybe was innately drawn to. But I'm willing to learn and similarly, I try to listen to certain podcast hosts, whether it's Tim Ferriss or Andrew Huberman. Like, yeah, I think they're brilliant. I'm interested in their 2 cents, but that is kind of their mastery of identifying really interesting stories and bring them together. And I was genuinely curious. Like, I played with Aaron. I played him a long time ago. Like, I'm so different than when I was 19, and like our relationship, just man to man, being older was so much different. And I was genuinely curious. Like, I saw some of his burn marks and literally never asked him. I just scared, or if he wanted to bring it up, I guess he could. And I was like, man, I really didn't know the story. Um, so I to piggyback off, like I genuinely was curious on what he was going through.
Again, for those that want to check out Curious Competitor, that's one that I might recommend. Is there one that you would personally recommend that sticks out for you? Something maybe that you've done in the recent past of these 74 episodes?
I really like my Dr. Andrew Hill one with Peak Brain. That one's a little bit interesting, just on like some of what they're finding in terms of concussion research and like something to do about it. Like the $1 million question I had. I have a son, and hey, Dr. Hill, would you study the brain? You have for 40 years or whatever. Would you let your kid play hockey? And he was like, yeah, I would. And so I have a lot of parent hockey listeners and players themselves, and it's kind of nice to know, like, you're not made of glass. Concussions are definitely something to be afraid of, but there's something you can do. Um, so I'll go with that one. That one's I did in the last few.
Let me ask you lastly, Connor. 11 years of pro hockey, still playing at an extremely high level, as we've seen in your debut season for the Firebirds. Whenever eventually that day is that you opt to hang up the skates, do you see yourself delving deeper into perhaps a broadcast world, or maybe would you say you have greater interest in learning more about the topics that you've covered on your program, whether that be the brain, whether that be meditation, whether that be nutrition and spirituality? Have you thought about that at all?
I mean, I think of the weight of the choice. It's just a shame in human life. Like, we are as small as we are, and our life's as short as it is. Like, there's going to be some things we don't get to, and I think about that choice being heavy. I'm confident whatever I choose, like I'll kind of enjoy and love, and I don't know. I kind of leave it open ended. Like, I played other sports, but like hockey had me. at a young age. It was going to be hockey. There was no other substitute. And so I'm kind of, I guess, just keep my ear to the ground. Like, I have an interest in human psychology or, biomechanics or the management of a great team or the coaching of a great team. Maybe that's something I'd go into, or broadcasting. But hockey chose me. I met a lot of people in high school, like my wife. I just knew she was significant. And so I'm kind of hoping whatever is to be presents itself, and we'll see what that day looks like when I get there.
Connor, so appreciative of your time. Certainly hope that you'll get back to the podcast. The last one I think was in September, and now of course we delved into the season. You got other things to do, but certainly hope they get back to it, man. Really enjoyed listening to it. I certainly intend to listen to more episodes. All the best in Abbotsford, and we'll see you guys when you get back to the desert proper next Wednesday, December 13th, again against Abbotsford, 3 in a row against that squad. Good luck, man. Safe travels. We'll see you back here soon, Connor.
Awesome, Jeff. Thanks.
All right, Firebirds flock. Thank you so much for your time, your interest, your ears, your continued support and enthusiasm for this endeavor. To wrap it up with this December 7, 2023 episode of the Fire and Ice podcast. Additional appreciation, of course, goes to this episode's guest. Fascinating talk, really interesting guy, great hockey player, Firebirds defenseman, Connor Carrick. And of course, powering this endeavor, title sponsor, Desert Willow Golf Resort, right here in Palm Desert, California. That's home to the Mountain View and Firecliff courses. Also, the excellent and on-site Palm Desert Golf Academy. You can make it a terrific putt-to-puck day. Go get in your cuts at Desert Willow Golf Resort and skate right on over, just 3 miles away to the Birds' home ice of Acrisure Arena. As far as those tee times or your swing at tutelage, you're going to find all that online at desertwillow.com. Best to the Birds for that double dip yonder Abbotsford. Again, it's a back-to-back on Friday, December 8th, and then this Saturday, the 9th, before the Birds return back for their next home game at Acrisure Arena, again against Abbotsford. That is a 7 p.m. puck drop on Wednesday, December 13th. We'll see you there at the Birds Barn. Until then, thanks again for tuning in. And remember, as always, one valley, one team, rising together.